Hi, everyone, and welcome to the I Am Landscape Growth Podcast, where entrepreneurs help entrepreneurs grow faster, better, and stronger in the green industry. From leadership to sales to recruiting and operational excellence, we cover the topics holding entrepreneurs back and share how to get past those bottlenecks with the best in the industry. I'm your host, Rob Murray, co founder and CEO of Intrigue, a digital marketing company focused on helping landscape companies grow. So sit back and enjoy the show. Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the I Am Landscape Growth Podcast. An awesome guest today, Jordan Daneker. Thank you, Jordan, for doing this. Pumped to have you on the show.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me, Robert. I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to it.
Sweet. So Jordan, just before we even got on the started press record, said he started at the bottom, and now he's running an awesome design build company up in North Carolina by the Outer Banks. And I'm like wicked pumped to come visit because I think you're the site visit at the next Sick Dump conference in 2025.
Yep, that's
Um,
correct. Yep,
so I
remember.
am selfishly oriented to seeing what the beach looks like in front of your place and maybe even getting in the water with a surfboard. But for the ticket today and understanding, what it takes to grow a landscape business, can you give people like a 30-second overview of how you started from the bottom and what you're focused on now in terms of the business at Evolve?
Yep. Just really quick overview. I actually started out in the maintenance industry. Had a maintenance firm for 7 years and got more and more into the design build. In short, I was able to sell that company. We had moved up to about 32 people, about $3.4 million in revenue, and sold that company. They're still operating today. And then I have a design build firm that focuses on outdoor living, and there's about 25 of us here now, and we also do quite a fair amount of pools. So, it's
Well, that's something specifically I'm going to bring up later on about your strategy for market. So we'll get there. I got a note here. And
Mhm.
before we get it, so design build 25 folks focus on outdoor living. And I mean, if you're watching a clip of this on LinkedIn or something like that, you can see the background is gorgeous, and that seems to be the type of properties that you as and your team focus on, right?
Yeah, absolutely. This is probably a great piece of showing what we're capable of in-house. We're really proud that we do 95% of things in-house, right? Try to control the process. So yeah, definitely. This has a pool, pavilion, pavers, fire pit, kitchen, you name it.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, appreciate that. Got some really cool stuff on the gram as well, if that's your thing.
What's the handle?
Evolve Design Build. So just
Check it out on Instagram.
yep.
Okay, we're going into American Thanksgiving tomorrow. We're on date of recording. It is currently November 27th. What is your like Thanksgiving tradition look like?
It's funny, man. It's crazy. Every time during the holidays, everybody's asking me like, "Hey, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do?"
Yeah.
And I have such a small family. It's really strange, and like we're super low key. We probably do as low key as anybody. We don't have a crazy tradition. I do have five brothers, and we all try to get together. And as simple as it sounds, we take a group photo of just the brothers for our tradition.
Whatever,
And
that's great.
I know it's silly and like, everybody has these big Thanksgiving, but it's like every year we like to look back and poke fun at each other of who got fatter or, who's thinner or whatever, because we're brothers, right? We're allowed to do that. So that's kind of our tradition.
I love it. I mean, doesn't have to be crazy for it to be worthwhile. And do your brothers all live close, or is everybody kind of a bit farther away coming back together for Thanksgiving?
Yeah, super blessed. Actually, two of them work with me, and have been here for
Oh,
the last
sick.
5 years. Yep. And then the other one is a Marine, and then the other one works for the Port of Norfolk. So the one's about 2 hours away, and the other one's about an hour and 15 minutes away. So we're still, we're
Far
all
far enough away not to kill each other, close enough to be able to hang out.
yeah, yeah. And then, of course, there is the sister-in-laws, and for whatever reason, we can't get along with each other's sister-in-laws, but we don't tell them that. So,
All right, I won't send them this.
no.
Okay, so the core theme of the podcast, we talked a little bit about it before we got recording. What
what is the primary growth constraint holding entrepreneurs back in the green industry? And I think, with where you came from, I mean, building a maintenance business, selling it, starting a design build business to getting it from 0 to 25, on repeat, you probably have some formal ideas on, what can hold people back and get in their way. So what do you see as the primary growth constraint these days?
Yeah, I mean, definitely I have a ton of opinions. I always tell people that, right? Whether they're worth anything, who knows? The number one restraint for me, or constraint, excuse me, is the entrepreneur himself, honestly, in most cases. And that's been my experience. Having to humble myself. And also the devaluation of yourself, right? And I'll kind of, elaborate on that. I don't want to, get too wild out of the gate, but I'd say just to sum the question up, for me, the number one growth constraint is the entrepreneur himself, right? And a lot of people are like, what do you mean? I'm an entrepreneur. I want to grow. Like, I want to show this. We can't seem to delegate enough initially when we're an entrepreneur. We feel this desire to do everything ourselves, can't be done right. And really, the core strength of a good entrepreneur, in my opinion, is the ability to coach and delegate. And once you figure that out, typically you're able to grow.
Okay, so first of all, we get all sorts of answers to this question, right? Last year we heard it time and time again. Staff, there's no staff, we can't hire people. It's turned a little bit. Some people are like, leads and the market's softer. Some people say, not being able to train or keep good people. But I find the most successful people answer in a very similar way. And it's really between the ears, and getting their head right. And then once they figured that out, and going back to what you said, letting go or delegating and coaching, things really started to take off. But a common theme in a lot of folks that have answered similarly is they waited too long to do it. They wish they had done it earlier. Um, Sometimes there was like a life event that made them think differently, like it took them out of the business. Sometimes like a health event or something like that. Sometimes it was coaching, mentorship. Like, what was it for you then? Like, that flip the switch to help you
Yeah.
say, I gotta get out of the way here.
That's wild that there's like a key indicator, because like for me it was the exact same thing. And like I feel like my key indicator was almost rude. Like I was offended. And I'll tell you what happened. I'll never forget the day, never forget the person's name. Client's name was Shirley Mazingo. Didn't even like her, honestly, just was cutting her grass. And she had probably been cutting her grass 3 years, and she always stood at her window, and she'd be that lady to call.
Scowling at you.
Yeah, oh yeah, dude. And you'd leave, you left the gate open, you missed the spot. And like we're like out there, it's 97 degrees in August. Everybody's tired, trying to do a good
Looks like
job.
you just jumped in a swimming pool. You're sweating so much.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So she said, I'm getting ready to leave. We're packing up the trailer. Probably been in business like
Stranger?
5 years, been cutting her grass 3 years. I'm trying to juggle everything. I'm tired. I look exhausted, thinking about everything. She says, Jordan, you got a minute? I'm like, this lady didn't even talk to me. What? I was like, yes, ma'am. Of course. She's like, come inside. I was like, oh, Jesus Christ. I'm like, I'm like, oh man. Sits me down on the couch, and she says, I'm probably gonna offend you what I'm gonna say, but I feel like it needs to be said. And I'm like, oh yeah, just again,
Here
just
it comes.
yep. She goes, I've watched you for 3 years. She said, I watch you on social media. I see your trucks all over the community. And she says, you don't think very highly of yourself. Swear to God. I'm like, I mean, I want to be like this, B. I'm like, all right. And
Get out of here.
this is the exact truth, man, not stretch. I said, what do you mean you don't think very highly? She goes, well, she says, you're a smart guy. I've talked to you a few times out here. You're a hard worker. She says, you don't realize your true potential. I can tell. And I said, you talking about? I was like, yeah, I'm growing a business. I'm building it. She goes, well, you must only be worth $14 an hour. And I said, what? She said, yeah, every day or every week you show up and you get on this mower. And she said, and you value yourself at exactly what job that you're willing to do at that skill set. And she said, for you, I can't figure it out because you have so much potential, but yet every day you value yourself at $14 an hour. And that's not me saying this, and even my staff, if they listen to this podcast, I'm not saying because you cut grass that there are people that is what they want to be doing. That's their
Sure,
job.
and it can be
That's,
enjoyable too, and
it's
it's a great way to
exactly,
be
it's
outside.
enjoyable. And I left there, and she's like, I would challenge you to have more value in yourself. That was it. That's all she said to me. She's like, have a good day, pretty much. I rode around that whole day, and I'm like, I was pissed, dude. I'm
Sure,
not
she just
like,
messed up your head.
yeah, I'm like, I'm laying in bed at night, and I'm like, this lady, she makes so much sense. Every single day I get on that mower. It's not about the mower, right? It's about the tasks that I take on, right? How am I ever going to get past those tasks when I only value myself at that cap, right? And is that a bad thing? No, it depends on what we want as an entrepreneur. Do we want to be an owner operator? Do we want to grow the business? Everybody's goals in life are different, right? And so the point of the story is the pivotal point for me was realizing that in order for me to get to the next stage, I had to be willing to relinquish that duty and put somebody up there to where they thought that value for them was the best. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's great.
And so that was my pivotal point. It really was. It honestly, there's one other occasion when I went to Pennsylvania to meet with Tussie Landscape Group that also molded me, but that was the point where I said, I've got to start figuring out how to step away from certain things because I'm halting my own growth. We have this thing as entrepreneurs, we think everybody can't do as good as us. And
I don't know what you're talking about.
yeah, dude, here's the thing, dude. You want to feel really good about something. You want to feel good about that you're making a difference in your life. Watch somebody else succeed. I mean, it's as simple as that. Like my goal every day now, and like I'm not a 100-person company, right? I'm a 25-person company, right? But we do customization. There's some limitations with that where you have to have a certain skill set. I'm a coach, man. You look at when I say I'm a coach, I don't know if I need to be coaching other people, but I'm coaching my people, right? I'm showing
Yeah.
them how our brand is, how we're going to do things, how we're going to handle it, and we're honing those skills. And when those people win, I feel like I'm winning. So it really depends on what you want out of this life and where you're willing to set the bar. If you're willing to say that nobody can cut in a certain cut on a paver job because everybody else can lay the pavers, but when we get to cutting, I'm going to do all the cutting, for example, then that's where you've decided to stop. Or are you going to train the next person? You have to be willing to have enough patience to train that next person to handle the cuts so that you can move on to doing the next step, whatever it is. So, we have all,
Well, it's
yeah.
awesome. And how many people have you met or have I met where something gets difficult and they go, F it, I'll go back a little bit smaller, come back a step. I'll take care of this stuff and it'll be fine. Instead of letting somebody mess up a bunch of cuts so they can get good at it. Because there's no way somebody was a perfect cutter their first time. And so it's like, how much are you willing to let someone go down this path and watch them fuck shit up
Yeah.
and be like, this is worth it because at the end of the day, I'm getting myself into a new elevated position inside an organizational setting.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that. Like as an entrepreneur, we're sometimes like running our budgets so tight that we can't afford to even do that because there's so much money on the line. Like you have to go back before you can go forward. And what I mean by that is when you're training somebody, you can't expect the same production out of that person that you're going to have, and you're going to be sweating it. You're going to be like, oh my God, we got to get this done. We got to get this done. You got to learn how to pump the brakes, woosah and say it's okay, right? Like it's okay. This
Well,
individual needs this. Do you know what I mean?
I well, and I think you're alluding to this idea, and maybe you can just validate it from what I'm hearing. But a lot of people are looking at the quarter, like the month, the quarter, the year. The year is almost like the long-term vision, as opposed to like the 3 to 5 years where are we trying to take this thing to. And I find when people are a bit more short-sighted, like, focused on the month and the quarter, it becomes really difficult to let go of anything because you're not going to necessarily be as profitable as you planned because someone else is doing it and it's not necessarily as good.
Yeah, I mean 100%. And also I think people get so focused on the money now, right? I have this saying that I've told my brothers. The interesting thing about working with your brothers is they
Well, that's
constantly
a whole
want.
other episode, I think. But
Yeah,
anyway, keep going,
yeah,
keep
they
going.
they they just want to raise, right? So same. They always like, I need to get a raise. I need to get a raise. I'm like, and I have this thing I tell my brothers all the time. if you don't worry about the money and you worry about doing the job, the money will take care of itself.
Mhm.
Okay. And so I tell the people, it's the same way you got to think with that 1 year, 5 year. Listen, we all got bills to pay. I'm not discounting that. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying focus more on the now and the process, and the process will take care of you in 3 to 5 years. And people,
Yes.
entrepreneurs typically are not, they're so all over, they've got all these ideas and they can't clean up their processes, so their processes will never take care of them. You can be a great entrepreneur, but if you're not willing to pump the brakes and create those processes, you're never going to see, in my opinion, you're not going to see long-term success. You may see short-term success. You may see that, but you've got to be willing to clean up your act to get to the next level, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, for sure it does. And let's get into some specifics. And we'll dig on the process piece and then come back to letting go and delegating and becoming a coach inside the company. So first of all, let's say whatever, I'm 1 million, 2 million, 3. I got a decent crew. We're doing well. We don't have a lot of processes in place. Things are a little chaotic, but overall we're doing okay. Now we want to get to 2.5, 3 million plus. Like what did you what did you hit? Like what symptoms were you experiencing when you're like, we got to get this process stuff figured out. We got to slow down a little bit and get our shit straight.
Yeah, that's funny. And another, when you said that, another thing came to my mind. I had the great thing about like our industry is we typically end up working for successful people.
Mhm.
We do work for a lot of different people, but in a lot of cases, we work for smart people. And I had this other client, his name was David Hart. And it's funny, years ago, I really had trouble getting from like 3 to 4 to now where we are today. We're going to be just shy of $7 million in gross revenue this year. And there those look totally different, by the way. 2 to 3, I had this conversation the other day, and really like 3 to 5 is a funny spot. But after 5, I swear things get easier. You have more people, right? And what it was for me was the administrative position. I didn't realize you have this thing as an entrepreneur, especially in this trade, that everything's revenue generation, right? Like you have to generate revenue, right? Well, we come from working with our hands. So we have to say positions for me that didn't make sense were administrative positions. I'm like, well, she doesn't make us any money. Like we got to be out there doing this.
She's not getting customers or keeping customers.
Right, right. Like we're making all the run. Like how can I do this? Like it doesn't make any sense. And so I'll never forget when I hired a procurement manager, right? That just orders materials, takes on stuff. Because I was like so behind. I'm like, things are missing on the job where our man hours are like, I've done it all. Like we've been messy as messy gets. Like, dude,
Yeah.
like guys sitting on the job, 4 guys, where's the coping at for the pool? Where's this? Where's that? And I was at a client's house, David Hart, and he's like, David comes out and he's like, man, you need a procurement manager. I was like, what the hell is that? I mean, literally, I'm like,
Yeah, I don't even know what you're talking about.
yeah, you need a guy that procures materials. He procures, supplies. He's making sure everything's here. I'm like, David, you know how much money that's going to cost me? He's like, it's not going to cost you any money. I'm like, what do you mean it's not going to cost me money? He goes, it's going to save you money. I was like, how's it going to save me money? Well, you're going to be efficient. He's like, it's going to save you money. He's not there to make you money. He's not going to make you money. I'm like, yeah, he's not going to make me money. I'm
Yeah,
paying him. He's sitting
F
around.
that. Yeah,
I'm like,
exactly.
he's not making me shit. He's like, dude, he's there to save you money. And I'm like, we got to stop thinking, how can we get to the next level? It's not all labor driven, right? We think that because that's where we came from in this industry. Everything we've seen to generate revenue has been labor based. We've got to start thinking in a different way. So I guess the way to answer that question is your administrative team, it should be as strong as you feel your field team is. And to me, that's when you can start to put forth the growth. And I'm going to tell you why. If you can't control the customer experience from a getting back to them in a timely manner, from a getting out proposals in a timely manner, for making sure at the end of the job things are cleaned up and everybody's satisfied, you can be the best craftsman in the world, the
Mhm.
best mower, the best grass cutter, and there's no closure for them. The process isn't clean. And so being able to clean up the process and have the administrative backing is when you really start to get into that next stage of growth. And that's hard to realize as a guy that came from the field. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, and one of the things I want to qualify with that idea is this is a kind of general observation of uh, firms in the Canada and the USA, but essentially an average productive firm tends to do about $100,000 revenue per person. Some 120, 125, 500,000 per person is like highly productive top 1% of the country. You guys did 7, 8 million on 25 people. You're looking at 220, 240 a person. That is highly productive. You can only be that kind of productive when you're efficient. And the thing I just heard from you is that you can only be efficient if you got your processes and your admin in shape.
Yeah, no, you hit the nail on the head, and it's really tough. It was tough for me, man, Robert. Like I struggled with it. I couldn't understand it. And like now today, nothing's ever easy. I'm not going to act like it's easy, but we did an exercise at the Synced Up event where the companies with more people had more resources. And I will tell you that we have the resources to handle problems as they arise. The things get messed up, absolutely. Like we dropped the wrong color pool the other day at the right house, wrong color pool. We had the pool picked back up and brought back to our shop, unloaded, and a new pool set in place and started to backfill within 3 hours because we have the resources and the manpower to handle it. And I think that as entrepreneurs, especially in the green industry and hardscape industry, we get so consumed by, not having processes and not taking the time to grow and just doing the work that we really handicap ourselves.
Yeah, I think that's a great lesson for everybody. And I also feel like you might have a book in the making about what you learned from your landscape clients.
Yeah, yeah, I know.
Each chapter is one of your customers giving you leadership lessons on how to grow a business. Um, is there another customer that pops in mind that helped you with something out of curiosity? Like, is there somebody we're missing that we should bring in?
Um, man, they always come to you like if you're asked like put on the spot and think about it,
Yeah,
probably not. I've had so
but
many great clients. Like, and here's what I will say. Look, if you're like the job behind me, okay, it's a $400,000 job. That guy's not a dummy.
no.
Like he's writing checks for it, right? Like we've done jobs from, simple, obviously small jobs to the largest job to date is close to $1 million, 993, I think it was. Those guys didn't get there by making, dumb decisions. Like you should talk to your clients.
I
Any,
love that though for folks. Like, what a beautifully simple idea.
yeah. Like, listen, let me tell you something. If you ask any successful entrepreneur, any true entrepreneur, okay, he's gonna want to share with you. He is. He's proud. He is proud. And not only that, he's probably been there. And so I don't care if he's in the IT sector. I don't care if he makes
Food production, whatever.
doorknobs, right? If he makes doorknobs, you're like, I'm never. That guy had some similar problems. You're going to take one nugget from him, and you literally are getting his time for free. Where there'd be a lot of people that would love this guy behind me that you see this photo. He owns this company called Smith and Keen. Okay. He's got 300 employees. He started from the ground up. He ain't no slouch, and he'd love to stand out there and tell me about how he did this. He's reminiscing. He's talking about I'll tell you another client. I'm going to tell you a guy, Davis Malott, and I'm
There
probably
it is. Chapter 3.
right. So here is a complete stud. I mean, a stud. Okay, Davis Malott in the equipment business. Okay, he was working for John Deere. Okay, and before the internet. All right, I'm working for this guy. We're doing a massive patio before the internet. I said, Davis, how'd you do all this? I thought you said you used to work for John Deere. Now he owns this massive company that ships used equipment all over the continent. Okay. Blew my mind. He said, Jordan, there was a time where you would come to trade in your John Deere, buy a new one, and it stayed on the lot. And I said, and then we try to sell it locally. We'd have all these John Deeres sold locally. And we couldn't get them sold because guess what? Our radius of customers was 200 miles. He said, you got to understand this before the internet. He said, one night I was sitting there and a man dropped off a fax machine. And he said, hey, this is a fax machine. You can dial out. We had it for 6 months. 6 months. I kept thinking about this fax machine. He goes, this thing's the biggest piece of crap in the world. What am I going to do with it? He said, I was sitting there at my desk and I had 42 pieces of traded in equipment out there. And my manager told me, and he says, I'm a sales guy. He said, we got to figure out a way to get rid of this, Davis. He said, so I drew up on a piece of paper and a flyer all the equipment that we had. I wrote it on a piece of paper. I went to the phone book and I found all the John Deere companies in the US, and I faxed that paper to all the John Deere companies in the US, and I left, didn't think nothing of it. And I
Yeah.
said, what do you mean you're thinking nothing of it? He goes, I just faxed it out, a list. He said, I got back the next morning. Our phone was ringing off the hook. We sold 32 pieces out of the 40 some pieces and shipped them across the country. And he said, we did it because somebody in Florida that didn't have access to the piece of equipment I had on my yard was looking at a John Deere 206 or whatever, but he couldn't find one within a 200-mile radius because he didn't have the ability to look at it. And then Davis built a multi-million-dollar company, okay, from a fax machine before the internet, sending out like genius, right? So
Yeah.
these guys that you're working for, they're studs or gals. Ask them how they did it. Ask them how to get processed. Odds are they have an answer.
Well, and what a cool way to connect with the customer.
Yeah.
Not only the life lessons and business lessons, but a great way to build rapport with a person that's spending a lot of money with your business.
Yep. Yep. And
No
sorry.
one. So I mean, I've interviewed hundreds, if not thousands, of people, hundreds in the green industry. No one has ever said talk to your customer the way that you're sharing today. So I think that's a huge opportunity for anybody listening to the show.
Yep.
So coming back then, full circle to your answer on the primary growth constraint, and it's the entrepreneur having to develop themselves essentially so they can, delegate and coach. And what so you had this wonderful customer tell you that you didn't value yourself, and then that messed you up. You started thinking about, okay, I need to figure out how to train some people. But what did you do? Like, if someone's listening to this and they can see themselves in a similar position, to your story, whether they're out mowing the lawn or doing whatever it is on the tools, and they've made a decision, you know what, I do want to elevate myself, I want to start delegating and coaching more. What was the first one or two things you did to make that change come to life?
Yeah, I mean, one of the first things I would say is, we work so hard at our craft that sometimes we forget to work on ourselves. And I really got into audiobooks. As crazy as that sounds, I was always riding, I always had my ear pods in, and one of the first books I read was the Book of Why. I don't know if you've ever read that, and it was just really trying to find what my purpose is. I think that like the entrepreneurs of today, don't get me wrong, I kind of grew up when social media was like, really starting to get its foothold, right?
Right.
But I almost feel like the entrepreneurs of today are at a disadvantage to some degree because it can appear as though somebody had instant success, right? And
Oh, sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, everybody's life coaches on Instagram. Like, I'm not sure
and
what
you
that
got to be
is.
careful with those guys. A lot of those guys are great con artists. They're great salesmen. There's very few real guys that are willing to tell you, they struggled, right? They crawled before they walk, and they fell a lot. And I
And they
did all,
got kicked.
they got kicked. I say this often, I 11 years in business. The last 2 years we've done, over $6 million in revenue. This year, reaching just over seven. And it's not about your revenue, right? To this day, and I feel like we're very profitable, and I'm proud of that. Uh, I have still lost more money than I've made thus far at the 11-year mark. Now I'm hoping that eventually uh,
Tips.
changes. But at this point, just to tell you, at 11 years, I've lost more than I've made. And I'm not embarrassed to say that because I've learned a lot of lessons. And then I really think that we need to learn how we're going to work on ourselves. Again, you got to figure out what makes sense to you. My ideal dream, I'm reading a book right now called Blue Collar Cash. And one of the exercises, the guy talks about taking a piece of paper out and drawing what your ideal life looks like, right? On the paper. And so if you're an entrepreneur that says, I'm just going to, you're not like me and you want to have all these people, not everybody wants 25 people, right?
Sure. I hear that too. Yeah.
Yeah, then be highly profitable, right? You need to get down to your core skill set. You love your craft, right? Learn how to make it efficient, learn how to make it so it doesn't tear your body up, and learn how to plan for the future, right? In terms of, what it looks like for retirement. So work on yourself. That would be my biggest thing. I'm constantly in self-help books. I'm constantly asking questions. Like you have to be so humble. Like people always say there's no such thing as a stupid question. Well, there isn't, but the problem is nobody's willing to ask the stupid question.
Hmm.
People like to talk like that, but like I could care less what anyone thinks. If I'm in a room, I'm always respectful, but I don't care about looking like a dummy. I've been a
Yeah.
professional failure my entire life. So really just working on your core attributes and your core self. And I would say more often than not, you probably need some leadership training. I've taken leadership one, two, and three. Um, through this curriculum online, and light bulbs go off, things that you're like, well, that makes sense, well, this makes sense. And how can you know something that somebody hasn't told you, and what good is experience if you were never trained the right way?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
I would really say, for those core skills, they're fundamentals. There is no recipe to, being an incredibly successful entrepreneur, because everybody's grit is different, but there is a recipe to fundamentals. And a lot of people are not even willing to work on the fundamentals.
Well, I mean, you said a lot there that I think people maybe have a bit of like surface level consciousness about. Some people have actually done the work, which is a big deal. And I think personal development, leadership development, they kind of go hand in hand. Um, and I think one of the things you said there is like just because you're practicing something doesn't mean you've been trained properly. So yeah, what it reminded me of that quote with Bruce Lee. What is it? Something about I fear not the man of 10,000 kicks one time. It's like I feel like I practiced one kick 10,000 times and
Yep.
got it figured out properly. Um, so the book you mentioned, you said the Book of Why. Did you mean Start with Why by Simon Sinek?
Yeah, start with why. Yeah,
Yeah,
start.
cool, cool. And there was another one, Book of Why, I haven't heard of, but I saw it. That's why I wanted to validate, which is amazing. But if you look at other personal development, resources, what are some other ones that have kind of hit you over the head with like, oh my God, this was a really worthwhile piece? And then also, can you share what that leadership curriculum was online, that one, two, and three?
Yeah, so I've got like a whole list of audiobooks that I go through now, because like, if I'm on a plane, I'm just a guy that needs to find productive time. Like I feel like if I'm watching TV or doing something, I'm not being productive. So I've got an entire list, but Betsy, I want to say it's Betsy Brown wrote the 5 second rule. I will tell you that you'd be shocked how many entrepreneurs don't read HR books. There's a lot of really good HR ladies out there that have nuggets, right? Want to, among that list, there's a lot of books that hype you up, like David Goggins, right? People are all familiar with him, and those hype
Sure.
up books are great, but the ones that tend to be less hype and more facts, and they can be boring, are really, will really help you. But there's this rule that I live by from a book I read. It's called the 5 second rule, and we constantly put things off, right? And I literally start a countdown. Like, I don't want to call this customer. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. And really trying to get over that hurdle for me, I'm like, one, two, three, four, five, dial the phone, right? I learned that from a book, and I treat that with my team. Even really, I hate to say this, my wife, she's going to kill me if I say this, my spouse, right? Like, because I love her, and sometimes we have disputes. We've been married 15 years, right? And
Gonna happen, yeah.
yeah, so like I'm like, all right, one, two, three, four, five. I gotta go talk about this with her. And like we do that with our people. So that's a great book. The leadership accountability was actually the National Fire Academy, believe it or not.
Oh, cool.
As crazy as
Well,
that.
leadership comes in every form. Like it's not industry specific by any stretch.
And I get on wild goose chases, and one thing, I am not bashful, and honestly, my staff will tell you, we have probably some of the most trained staff when it comes to our craft. I spend money on education. Now, what's funny about that is I'm a high school dropout. I don't even have a diploma. I,
Well,
I
the public school systems and post-secondary and real education, yeah, maybe a little different.
Yeah. And so like I always joke, I'm like, I could care less about high school. Like I finished 10th grade, right? Like I had math one. So the National Fire Academy, what was so interesting about that was span of control. Like I have great leaders here that their span of control and my span of control is two different things. And you can take a really successful leader and really screw him up by giving him too much span of control, like, whether it be 3 guys, 5 guys. And so I would encourage, also people to look at that, right? Like, everybody's different. And so it was a National Fire Academy. And I don't know what your other question is. I'm sorry, I got off on a
No,
tangent.
you answered both of them. I was asking another
Yeah.
resource. You mentioned the 5-second rule, which is Mel Robbins. Is that right?
Mel Robbins. Yep. I always forget their name. Betsy Brown is the HR one she's like that. Really, I would say those HR books are like really core when you start to build your administrative team. Like their desires are so different than the guy that comes in and wants to swing a hammer. Like
Sure. Well, I mean, you say it, it sounds so intuitive, but I think some people just it's like it's an oversight.
Mel Robbins, that was it. Yeah, 5 second rule. Like to this day, and like I preach the 5 second rule on all kinds of stuff. Like that, it sounds really corny, and it has changed a lot of my mental like space, like in terms of like just being more relaxed, right?
Is
Like
it is the
handling.
Betsy Brown book, You're Not the Boss of Me?
Yeah, Betsy Brown. Yep, she's got a couple. Yep.
Yeah,
Mhm.
cool, cool, cool.
Yep, yep. And I mean, I've just been all over the map. I've read some duds. Grant Cardone. I'm not a big Grant Cardone fan, but he is a stud at hyping people up. And if you're struggling with sales, I mean, you got to be like a Swiss Army knife in today's world. A great entrepreneur is an ideal Swiss Army knife. He's got scissors on one hand, he's got this, he's running with those, a knife on the other, tweezers here, this and that. Oh, by the way, he's got a corkscrew to open a bottle of wine when times are fun, and so the more versatile you are, the better you're going to be. And it is fun to coach people. It's fun.
Cool. So then somebody as a final, like as we wrap up here, someone says they want to start coaching more. What are some of the tips you'd give somebody on coaching?
Patience. Everybody learns at a different rate. It's been really challenging for me. I've stood behind guys that I've watched try to glue a fitting into a piece of pipe that I just wanted to grab a hold of them and smack the heck out of them. And if any you are mothers or fathers,
USA.
yeah, you obviously are used to that, but you don't know where people came from. You don't know what their background is. You don't know if they were as fortunate as you were to get certain training or had the certain figures in their lives. And, it's more of a challenge to mentor somebody who hasn't had that. But when you see them succeed, the fulfillment is triple to quadruple fold that. So that would be my number one tip is, and try to see it in multiple ways and listen. Sometimes I find myself as not a great listener. I want to tell you, all this great things. I'm a big talker, and I'm really trying to focus on that. As I'm not old by no means, but I'm 38, and I'm really trying to learn how to listen more. And it's tough because as entrepreneurs, we think we know everything.
That's cool. Which then full circle back to your original statement on letting go of stuff and not being the person that knows everything, being one of the biggest challenges for people to grow their companies. It's super cool.
Yeah, and not to, real quick, I'll say this. People are going to mess up. Let them mess up. Let them figure it out. I have been literally in a situation where I want to call and be like, this is how you got to do it. Let them mess up and then talk about it. Why? It's okay. It's
Yeah.
okay. Don't let them kill nobody, but it's okay.
Right. Yeah, no, that's cool.
Yeah.
I love that, man.
Yeah.
And so a couple of resources you've already mentioned. Start with Why, Simon Sinek, You're Not the Boss of Me, Betsy Brown, Mel Robbins, the 5-second rule. First break all the rules. Have you heard that one?
I have not heard that one. I will say that Simon Sinek has a ton of good ones, but
Yeah, Leaders Eat Last is great. The Infinite Game, they're all solid. I mean, as much as he's a bit of a pompous human, his content's pretty epic.
yeah, exactly. Yep. No,
Um, you got one more?
No, I was just looking through my list trying to pull it up, but I don't want to. I mean, there's so many over the years I've listened to. Just we have a lot of drive time in my area, and I don't know. I will say that specifically to our trade right now, just for new guys, if you can even get new guys, blue collar cash has been huge because there's such a deficit in the trades right now, and I really believe that these massive tech firms you hear about doing so well, and I really believe that that's achievable through a construction or a maintenance firm. I really feel like that you're really going to see people have a lot of success in the trades in the next 5 to 10 years.
Well, I love it. And you're in a good position to do it. And I think the landscape industry is just a epic spot, and really appreciate you sharing. Like, this is just like the standard. Like, everybody's just so open and willing to share what they've been through. So I appreciate Jordan for doing it.
Absolutely.
Um, I think that's it for this episode. We'll have to have you come back on and talk about how you run a family business because that's got to have its own ups and downs and dynamics, for
Oh,
sure.
yeah. Yeah, I got my brothers here. I actually my business partner, his brother works here. My nephew works here. His wife works here. It's
Yeah, so that's an episode in itself on communication and leadership from a
crazy.
different point of view in a big way. Thank you again for doing this, Jordan. Appreciate it, and everybody for listening to
Sure.
another episode of the I Am Landscape Growth Podcast.